Good morning, grade 7. Today I would like to show you how to make chicken and cinnamon filo parcels. It's near the end of your sector programme. I can't remember, I think it's about week 15, something like that. Anyway, as you know, you can jump around these recipes as and when you have the ingredients. So the recipe looks like this: chicken and cinnamon filo parcels, and it's attached to that lesson on sector. I'm just getting that on camera so that you can all see the recipe clearly. Alright, it's a fairly simple recipe, but it has quite special results really for something that's quite simple to do. And it consists of having onions and garlic cooked very lightly in some olive oil in a frying pan. Then we add finely chopped chicken to that, along with passata, which is really just a sieved tomatoey sauce, not ketchup sauce, but like tinned sieved tomatoes, and some honey, and a small amount of cinnamon and parsley. It's a really tasty, very nice filling. And today, the really special part, or the new part, is to teach you how to use filo pastry, which some of you may or may not have used before. Filo pastry is usually either in the chilled part of the fridge in the supermarket, or it's in the freezer part. And it's a really crispy pastry, which is very, very thin, and it has very little fat in it. But you add the fat in the form of melted butter as you're handling it. And it's a little bit tricky to handle. There's no way that you could make this yourself at home. It has to be bought. But it's not very expensive, and it goes a long way, and I'll show you the tricks of the trade with handling filo pastry. So this recipe is going to start then with, I've already got the oven on at 190, and I'm going to lightly fry half a chopped onion, which is what it says. I've cut it in half with the skin on, peeled the skin off, left the root on, and then I'll change knives, and then start finely chopping it, as I've shown you before when you were making other things online. And we'll be doing soup today again. I'm going to show you pumpkin soup after this. And we're having a really big day today with these demonstrations. The third one I'm going to do is a sticky date pudding, and that should be almost all the grade 7 recipes online. The only one that's left to do next week then is vegetable and meat lasagna. Okay, there's the finely chopped onion. Now a clove of garlic. It gets popped out of its skin under the widest part of the knife. So the small knife's no use for that because it's not wide enough to put the garlic under, but this wider one is, and I want to finely chop that. Now, one of the things to be aware of when you're just starting to cook these onions, this time we're not going to saute them, we're actually going to very lightly brown them. So that means a little bit more heat. But one of the things to be aware of is not to have your oil too hot and then drop the onions in. If you get the oil too hot and it's smoking and you drop onions in, they will burn and it will go black. It's easy to do that and make that mistake. If you do that, throw the onions out and the oil and start again. Don't add other expensive ingredients to burnt onions, because that flavour will taint right through the dish. So olive oil in the frying pan. And normally we would say, if I was frying chicken, which I will be later, have the oil quite hot before you put the chicken in and you want it to sizzle. But in this case, with onion and garlic, it's not a bad idea to add it when the oil is still quite cold. Now, it's also this is something I also learned a few years ago at an Indian cooking class, where the Indian lady said, put your spices into cold oil and bring them up to the heat, because it's very easy to scorch spices and ruin a dish that way as well. So that was an interesting tip that I picked up a long time ago from an Indian cook. So there we are, onions and garlic are in there, and they'll come up to the heat. While that's working, I'm going to get a separate board for the chicken pick away these. Now, you know about handling chicken. We've talked quite a lot about handling chicken in our food poisoning and food handling at the beginning of the year. So I've got a really big chicken breast here. If you were doing this for a family, I would double the recipe. Now, I defrosted this in a takeaway container in the fridge overnight, so I didn't leave it out on the bench or anything. And I want to cut this up into chunks, not too big, because what we're making here is a filling for the phyllo pastry, and the size of these pastries, when they're made up, is about the size of a big spring roll. So we don't want great big chunks of chicken, because this has to fit into the pastry filling that we've got, the pastry case that we're going to roll it all up in. So there we are, some long strips of chicken. So make sure your knife is sharp, and don't take the chicken out of the fridge until you're ready to actually handle it and use it. Remember all you learned about the danger zone? Don't ever leave chicken in the danger zone, which is between 4 degrees and 60, for any length of time at all. So that's when the microorganisms and the bacteria will start to divide and multiply, and we certainly don't want that. Or you would make your family very sick. Make sure when you've finished handling raw chicken that you wash your hands in good hot soapy water, and your knives and board are washed in hot water too, not lukewarm water. Another thing I've seen over the years is when I've seen butchers looking after their wooden blocks in butcher shops or in restaurants, and if they can't get straight to hot water, they actually put a lot of salt all over the board. That's another good way of killing off any bacteria. So there we are. I can smell that that's just right. I need to wash my hands like I just said with some soap. The smell of the onion and garlic is different. It starts to smell slightly sweet because the sugars in the onion start to caramelize very slightly. Alright, so I know that the onions and garlic are just right now because they're just starting to tinge golden on the edges, and they smell quite sweet and really nice. But if you do make a mistake and you singe them or burn them, throw it away at this stage and start again. But anyway, this seems to be just right. So now I'm going to add the chopped chicken all at once to this pan, and I'm turning the heat up a bit. There we are. All of this over at the sink. Remember, no knives in sinks. Don't drop the knife into the sink. I'm just filling that up with really hot water to soak these two chopping boards, the chicken one and the onion one. Now that's looking good. That's what I wanted. Turn the flame up just slightly. That's it. Now I want it to sizzle a bit. And to this, once this is browned a little, I'm going to add some of the passata. The recipe says half a cup, but I don't think that's enough for this amount of chicken. And it also says half a tablespoon. Yes, half a tablespoon of honey. I also don't think that's enough. I've given it more like a tablespoon of honey. If you don't have honey, you can put some brown sugar in instead, or even some golden syrup, or some maple syrup, or just a tablespoon of white sugar would do. But before you actually start to fill the pastries with this, taste the whole thing for seasoning once it's properly cooked before you put it into the pastry, and then you'll know, does it need a splash of balsamic vinegar? Does it need more sugar? Does it need more salt and pepper? And that's the kind of thing you start to learn as time goes on. You become more familiar. But you really should never serve food that you haven't tasted for seasoning. You don't need to eat a whole portion of it, you just taste it and then decide what else it needs before you serve it. And I find that happens a lot in restaurants. I've had a lot of very under-seasoned food in restaurants because it's not been tasted before it was served. And then I like salt and I like quite good strong flavours, so some people might not agree. Alright, back to my vegetable board. While that's cooking, we're going to chop parsley that gets added to the sauce. This is the last of my parsley from this summer in the garden. I'll give another knife, I think, for that. The rest of the parsley's all gone to seed, but there's enough for this dish. If you don't have fresh parsley, you could add some dried parsley. You can also do without it. If you don't have it, it won't matter. The cinnamon and the honey are two of the key flavours in this, so the parsley really won't matter if you don't have it. There we are. So when you're chopping like this, these fingers straight on the top of the knife, point side of the knife goes down, and it's the handle end that turns. You see what I mean? It's going right and left while the point end of the knife stays down. So finely chopped parsley's there. That's it. That's ready to go. This is looking better. It's starting to go golden brown on some sides. See that? So just keep it moving a little so that it doesn't singe or burn, because you're still protecting and caramelizing these onions and garlic without it burning. There we are. That looks good. Smells good too. And let that go a little bit longer. And then I'm going to add, it said 1 cup of the passata. She says half a cup, but I'm going to give it maybe 3/4. Strike a balance. There we are. And the honey. Any kind of honey will do, and I've already mentioned alternatives that you could use. Something as simple as a teaspoon of sugar, but this gives it a nicer flavour, and again this helps caramelise the flavourings a little bit more. Honey's quite expensive, so make sure you get it all off the spoon. And in there. There we are. And cinnamon. Now you might think it's quite unusual to put cinnamon into a savoury chicken dish, but it's not really. There's quite a lot of types of cuisine that do use cinnamon in savoury dishes. Moroccan cuisine, for a start, it's often cinnamon sticks or ground cinnamon are used in tagines, which are slow cooked meat dishes which are cooked in a tagine. A tagine is the name of the dish, and it's pointed a bit like a witch's hat, and the steam rises inside that and then runs down the inside of the lid, and it keeps it's a slow, moist way of cooking. There's the parsley going in, and the cinnamon. It says half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. So again, I quite like cinnamon, so I think I'll add a bit more than half a teaspoon. Just be careful that you don't overdo it though, and that gives it a lovely warm spice, a warm, gentle, spicy flavour. There we are, that's looking good. Now, if you are like me and you're not able to eat pastry or gluten, I would eat this with some vegetables, probably over some rice, and it's just a very nice, quick and easy chicken dish. So it doesn't have to go into pastry, but for today's lesson, if possible, I would like you to try and get hold of Filo pastry and learn how to use it. It's the type of pastry that's also used for cheese and spinach triangles, sometimes called spanakopita. You may have eaten those in the past, and they're made with spinach and feta cheese, sometimes ricotta and leeks, and they're a really tasty vegetarian version of this. So there we are, that's looking pretty nice to me, but it's had no salt, so I'm about to add some now, and some black pepper as well, and I'll let that cook down a bit, and as it cooks it will thicken. So that's called reducing a sauce, where you're reducing the volume or the quantity of it, cooking it down slowly. That actually reduces the sauce and makes it go thicker and more sticky. So we'll stir that in, and I'll let that just cook on a very low heat while I get the pastry ready to use. Okay, I'll need one knife. So, some people think filo pastry is really difficult to work with, but it's not really if you follow the rules. So I'm going to use this silicone mat again for it. Here's the pastry. That can go away, don't need any of this anymore. I've got a tray ready with paper. I'm going to turn that off now. And melted butter. Remember I said to you it has very little fat of its own. You have to add the fat in the form of butter, which helps the pastry go golden and gives it a lovely flavour as well. So I'll show you what this looks like. It's actually very like tissue paper. Now it's only defrosted in the last hour, and when I take a sheet off the pile, you will see how thin it is, and it really is a bit tricky to handle at the beginning until you're used to it. So have a look at that. See how you can see my hand right through it? It's really thinner than some paper. Now what we need to do is keep this moist very quickly. This dries out and it all crumbles, just like, well, almost like dried leaves, autumn leaves. It goes crunchy and just snaps and breaks. So to try and stop that happening, two of the sheets have stuck together there. I think I'm just going to leave them together. What you need to do is I'm going to work with these two and brush them with melted butter. The ones I'm not using just now, they get wrapped in a damp tea towel. Now, not soaking wet, it's been run under the tap and wrung really tightly, wrung out. And this keeps the pastry moist while you're working on the rest. Melted butter and a pastry brush is required. And I'm not going to throw away these torn bits because you layer this up. So a few holes here and there don't really matter because it's going to be layered and rolled as well. So it will get better as I get to the other sheets underneath that are not ripped. But ideally you should have butter between every layer. So what I'm going to do is fold this over. That's now giving me 4 layers. Butter all over this again. And remember, we're trying to make it look much like a sort of bigger, fatter spring roll. It does take quite a lot of melted butter. There we are. Then we take the filling. There's my, yes, this one. I'll put the hot pan on here. And we're going to taste it for seasoning and decide, does it need anything else? Now you'll see it's gone shiny and thick, and it's reduced, and it's also slightly caramelized with that honey that's in it and the onions that were there at the beginning. That's absolutely fine. So we take some of that and put it up this way, closer to you, not into the middle of the pastry, but quite close to your body. That's at this end. Pastry going long ways that way and narrower that way, perhaps a little bit more. So we fold the sides in, and that stops it all coming out the ends when you roll it. More butter. The fat that was missing has been well and truly made up for with butter, but that's what gives it flavour. So then start rolling. There you go. Now it doesn't matter if you get a hole in it, because you're going to roll and roll, and it will get rolled into the the thing in the first place. There we are. And there's the first chicken and cinnamon phyllo roll. Now these are really good for a family, for a nice family dinner, or for a dinner party or something, because the portions are really easy to see how many you're going to get out of it. So this will only give me, I think, 3 from this recipe. If you had been making this in the classroom, you would have worked in pairs and done 1 between 2 probably. But at home, you've probably got more people to serve. I haven't done this recipe for quite a long time at home, partly because I can't eat the pastry anymore. But I like to have them in the freezer, and I would freeze them at this stage before they're baked. And then on the day that I want to use them, I'd take them out the freezer, defrost them, and then put them in the oven and just bake them once. But they will be, they need to be brushed with butter once more when they come out of the freezer. I'm going to have to melt a lot more butter than I thought. So basically, you don't really need to see me keeping doing this. I've done one. I will melt some butter. We'll stop the film actually till I melt some butter, and I'll do one more, and then we'll go on to another dish, and I'll show you them when they're cooked. Alright, for the second one, oops, forgot, must cover up what I'm not using. Remember, roll it up and keep it covered with the damp tea towel. Otherwise it dries out and you end up throwing away quite a lot of it. Right, I've got more butter melted. I've covered the 2 sheets in butter, folded it over so that it's now 4 layers, and once more fill another one. Now this, I'm using chicken today, and I think that's the most suitable for this, but if you would like to use any other kind of perhaps minced meat, like perhaps pork cooked with some Chinese sauce, like a san chow bao filling, or beef mince with some vegetables and things, you could use that instead. If you're a vegetarian, you could actually make a really good stir fry, perhaps with some fried tofu or something like that in it, and fill it with vegetables. So sides in first, and then again brush with some butter. This is what gives it flavour and colour and makes it really crisp as well, and roll. You can see it's very thin, and usually you would sit it on the seam, so put the join underneath so that it won't unravel in the oven when you bake them. There we are. So you carry on. As I say, you'll get 3, possibly 4 from that recipe, but I would at least double it for a family. And you make it whatever way you like, but remember to keep this covered with the damp tea towel while you're working. Have plenty melted butter ready to go, and you can either freeze them like this or bake them and eat them straight away, and I'll show you them when they come out the oven. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing these. Well, here we are. Here's the chicken cinnamon phyllo rolls, the 2 that I made. They've come out the oven. I'm very happy with those. And I would serve them ideally with a salad and or some steamed vegetables as well. Now I don't have any salad leaves today, but I do have a few odds and ends that might make it look nicer for serving. But I'm pleased with those, and I hope that you'll try them at home. These are garlic and lemon olives, and I have mango and ginger chutney, which I've become rather partial to, and I know that that goes really well with something like this. So you serve with whatever you have. That's what we have to do. We have to compromise, but any kind of chutney is rather nice with this, and ideally some salad leaves as well. Perhaps I've got some tomato, but they're not great, and you can see even my capsicum is not in its first flush of youth. But anyway, it gives a bit of colour to the plate. A good sharp knife and nice thin pieces of capsicum, and that should just liven it up a bit. There we are. It is really lacking something green, but anyway, I'm pleased with those, and I wouldn't mind eating those. So please try them at home. This is a really quite easy thing that you can use for your family at home, and I look forward to seeing your pictures. If you don't have or can't get phyllo pastry, perhaps you could use frozen puff pastry instead. That would work as well. But please send me in your work. There's no point in me doing this unless you're actually going to learn from it and use it. Thanks very much.